Welcome to 3D versus 5D. What is the difference if you've heard about the different conscious states? We are Corey, Peyton, and myself, Yaila, and this week we're going to be discussing what is the difference between three-dimensional consciousness and fifth-dimensional consciousness. So Peyton, how about you kick us off?
Yeah, this is a great topic because it's something that we talk about all the time, but we don't always think to explain what we mean by this. So when we are talking about 3D versus 5D, and if you're part of the spiritual community, we talk about this all the time. It's just part of our daily discussion. And so when we are talking about that, what do we mean? Well, the way that I kind of look at the 3D, 5D conversation is this is part of the consciousness shift that is happening on the planet right now. And this is what we call the ascension process. So that's another word that goes along with the whole 3D, 5D conversation. And so when we're talking about 3D versus 5D, one way you can look at this is 3D is the operating system that we all grew up in for the most part. So until 2012 on the planet, we were operating in a planetary grid that was known as the third dimension or third density. And what that tended to mean when we talk about 3D, we are talking about one of the lower bands of frequency in the galaxy. So in 3D, Earth was playing a game of separation, essentially. So what that meant is everyone who is incarnating on Earth came here to play in 3D, to play in a low density, to play in separation from source. So when we talk about 3D, we're talking about this old framework, the old way we lived, where it was based on the idea that we were all individual and separate, that we operated in linear time, that there was a past, a present, and a future. That is one of the kind of main qualities of the third dimensional experience is linear time, because that doesn't exist in the rest of the galaxy. So when we are talking about 3D, we're talking about the planetary grid that most of us have spent most of our lifetime living in. And what is happening now on the planet is that we are moving from this 3D grid, which again, it was all based on separation. So we were separated from the idea that we're all one consciousness. We were separated from our memories of our past and future lifetimes. So 3D is characterized by this feeling of individuality at its best. That's the best way to look at it. And separation on the less beneficial end of the spectrum. So when we talk about 3D, we are talking about the old framework, and we're moving out of that very dense framework over the past 10 or so years officially, and it's going to continue until we make our final shift into what we call 5D. So essentially what is happening is we're raising our consciousness, and we are doing that both individually as light workers and starseeds, but we're also doing it as an entire planetary collective. So what we are moving into then is what we call 5D. And you can think of it as just a different operating system. So as we move into 5D, we start to move out of the idea of linear time. So time becomes much more flexible. And we also start to move back into what's known as unity consciousness, where we remember, because we've just forgotten to play the 3D game, we remember we are all one consciousness. And so what we are doing right now on the planet is going through a shift in paradigm, a shift in how we live. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about going from 3D to 5D. And so the zone that we are in right now is what we often call 4D. And you can look at that as fourth dimension or fourth density. And what that is, it's kind of a waiting room. So in 4D, there's such a huge difference between being in 3D and being in 5D that we needed a whole dimension to let us make that shift. So the interesting thing about where we are right now, which is what we call 4D, is that you can play the rules of either system. You can stay in 3D the way you have always gone about your life, feeling very separated. 3D is very mind-based. So it's based on living out of the linear mind, living out of thought. And you can also choose to access the operating system we're moving into. So you can access all the abilities and flexibility of the 5D system while you are in 4D. So when we talk about these two operating systems, we're talking about where we came from as a planetary species and where we are moving to. And so the reason that we talk about this and why it's, one of the hot topics of conversation in the spiritual community is because most of us want very much to be moving as much as we can and as rapidly as we can into 5D, because it is much lighter in density. We have greater creative powers. We remember all of our past, present, and future lifetimes. It is just what we want to experience as a much more love-based society. So we're shifting into 5D as we speak. We haven't quite completed our transition. So that is kind of how I look at the 3D versus 5D conversation right now. So how about you, Corey? What does 3D versus 5D mean to you?
Wow, Peyton. I think that was the greatest video ever. We're done. I'm kidding. Where do you go from there? That was so wonderful. 3D versus 5D. Well, if you've seen any of our videos about our energy updates, and I always do the astrology, I always talk about moving into the Aquarian age. So every 800 years, our planet shifts from one consciousness to another, and so to speak. And so we've been in the last 800 years in the age of Pisces. And Pisces is, deception. The lower vibration is deception, drug addiction, alcoholism, those types of things. That's the 3D. The 3D world, if we're talking about being in that age of Pisces, is, I always think of, these three words, money, property, and prestige. So 3D, or, three-dimensional, is about really the material things in life, thinking linear. I loved how you said that, Peyton, thinking in a linear way where we grow up, we, have mom and dad. Age of Pisces towards the end was really like maybe a one-parent home, separated homes. You go to college, you get a job, you get a degree, you get a job. You get the house, you get the car, you get the kids, and so on and so forth. That is living in the 3D world. And most of us, yes, I love that. We are shifting, Peyton, when you said shifting, from 3D to 5D, and really the old paradigm. We're shifting out of an old paradigm, an old way of believing, an old way of living our lives where we work a lot of hours. It's also chop wood, carry water. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. It is in the mind, the 3D, three-dimensional plane where, you work, pay a lot of taxes, and don't have much time for family or yourself. That's the three-dimensional plane, linear. Monday through Friday, blank, 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 Saturday and Sunday, timelines. And fifth dimensional, one of the things that before I go into the fifth dimensional is people ask me, 3D to 5, what does that mean? And there are schools of thought out there where literally our planet Earth is going to physically split into two different Earths, physical Earths. And I don't see it that way. It is a consciousness. All the dimensions and the densities are stages of consciousness. It is the evolution of the earth, if you want to say it that way. So it's not a physical, you stay on this 3D earth and we'll go to the 5D earth. It is all of us, on this planet, raising our consciousness, evolving over time, moving into the Aquarian age. So what does that consciousness look like? The 5D consciousness is that age of Aquarius, unity, community, the love vibration, all being together and realizing that we're all one. We all come from the same creator and we are all on this planet together. And it's a unity consciousness. It's also a consciousness of, we talk about all of our energy work, and all the different modalities of energy work. Also, the Aquarian age, the 5D, is that frequency of energy. Frequency, more of a spiritual way of life, as opposed to working the 9 to 5. The 3D is working the 9 to 5. And yes, separate. I loved how you said that, Peyton. We're just thinking about ourselves. Single-mindedness. That's the 3D. And as we're moving into that, the 5D, the age of Aquarius, you'll hear me say frequently in the energy updates, is we're moving into a new paradigm where the old systems are being brought down because it can't exist in the 5D consciousness, the 5D level of greed, power, money. The 5D consciousness, money looks different. It looks a lot different where we have, trading. I give you 4 apples, you give me 4 oranges. I'm just kidding. But that all looks different in the 5D. So yes, we are in the 4D and we are transitioning into the 5D consciousness. Now, the thing is too, is that 3D is very service to self, single-minded. Me, I. What am I going to do? What am I going to accomplish? How do I look? How many followers do I have? And the 5D is the we. In order for us to move to that 5D, it takes all of us. It takes all of us. Yes, there will be some who don't want to go. And it's a choice and it's okay. But the 5D is a unity consciousness. So we all need to go together. The 4th density that we're in now is that transition period. Recognizing your consciousness, moving from your subconscious mind, moving it to the conscious mind, and healing those wounds so that we can all be in unity consciousness. Being able to recognize what the 5D, even knowing what 5D is, right? I mean, who knew years ago, what is this 3D, 5D? But actually learning about the 5D consciousness, which is it's a spiritual realm. It's a unity consciousness. So 4D is the transition of learning and healing all of our old wounds so that we can be of unity consciousness, 5D, versus just thinking about ourselves. And doesn't mean that we don't have to do our own work. because nobody can do your work for you but you. But you can get help, but only the individual can decide that they're going to go on this journey of healing old wounds, old beliefs from the 3D existence. And the 4th D is about doing all that work, the healing, all the shedding. It's like a snake, shedding the skin from the 3D and able to, I loved what you said, Peyton, being able to live in the 3D to be in the 3D without actually living in the 3D, and also being able to have that 5D consciousness. So I think that's what I have for now. How about you, Yaila? Tell us what you have on 3D to 5D.
I think that was just so beautifully put, the way you both shared your perspective on 3D versus 5D, and even how the 4th density dimension fits into that transition. So much of what you both shared, I definitely resonate with. And when I think of the 3D, I think of it kind of like the physical. I know Peyton kind of mentioned the mind. Corey mentioned, actual material type structures. And that's what I think of when I think of the 3D. I think of the individual self, the process, and it's very tactile. It's what kind of job do I have, what car do I drive. The goals are very physically oriented. Your status is represented by what's around you physically. It's a very outwardly show of who you are as an individual, and it's kind of represented on the smaller scale and larger scale throughout the communities, right? Like what does this community stand for? It's all represented by the physical outward appearance that everybody gets to see. And so the consciousness to me is surface level. It's surface level things, how it looks, what it's monetarily worth as far as like money standpoint. It's very surface level. It doesn't go that deep. With the 4th dimension, kind of where we're at now, to me, it's starting to question on a deeper level, what is this life really about? Because right now, moving from the 3D perspective, in my personal opinion, is again that surface level. Like things just happen by coincidence. The harder I work, the more things will show up physically in my world. And the 4th dimension, you're starting to question a little bit deeper. There's got to be something more to this life than just the kind of car and house I have. There's more to this life than just the day-to-day grind, the 9 to 5 grind. And I feel like more people right now are starting to question that. They're starting to notice that there is a depth to themselves. There is a deeper energetic presence within them. There's a deeper spiritual presence within them. And so we're starting to question, yes, we are a physical human being. We have this body, but we also have an energetic body. We also have a spiritual body. And we're starting to question, what does that look like? So for me, that's the 4th dimension. And then moving into the 5th dimension is that alignment between the head and the heart. Where 3D may have been ruled by fear and physical surface level, the 5th dimension is ruled by love and consciousness, right? There's not necessarily such a strong dichotomy, in my opinion, in the 5th dimension. Yes, there is various options, but there's not so much judgment and an energetic charge as what we would call it in the school. There's not so much better than, less than comparison. For me, in the 5th dimension, it's love. It's like, oh, what's in alignment for you? What resonates for you? Coming from the person's just learning, they're on their own path, getting their own experiences to find their own deeper spiritual connection to the whole. Where, the 3D, it was like, they're bad, they're wrong because they're doing XYZ. Now we're looking at things and starting to question, well, why does that show up? What new beliefs, what new consciousness, what new stories are we trying to connect with so we can find that unity consciousness? So for me, going into the 5th dimension, it is more heart-centered. Your worth isn't just what you own. Your worth isn't just what you do, these surface level things, but your worth is who you're being, how you operate from your heart. How do you operate in your connection to all that is and not just yourself? So for me, it's a deeper, more spiritual way of looking at the world and each other, where, you know, you don't have to tear somebody down to be right. You can look at where their journey is and maybe have compassion for, wow, they are moving through, breaking through so many cycles that were present for decades, centuries on this planet. And we are the generations right now who are shifting that consciousness, if we choose, into more understanding, into more love, into more unity. So that's kind of how I would shape the 3D to 5D. Ladies, do you want to add anything else as far as your thoughts?
Yeah, you guys reminded me of something. Another thing that I think, and both of you touched on this, another big difference between our old system of 3D and where we're moving is how we create our lives. Because 3D, and you guys both touched on this, is being very physical. Everything we do to create our lives in 3D in the old system was based on physical action. So in order to have the house, have the car, you had to do the work, you had to have the job. So everything that you wanted to have or accomplish, we did through physical action. But that shifts completely as we move into 5D. And so something the Pleiadians have been talking to us a lot about is that in 5D, we create through frequency. We create through energy. So physical action means very little as we move into 5D, because when you hold a high frequency, you attract whatever you need or want in your life. Whereas in 3D, you would have had to hustle and grind for that, which is what caught us in this 3D loop of, like Corey mentioned, having to work harder and harder and, you know, do the 9 to 5 to, you know, create or have those physical things that we wanted. But in 5D, that all goes out the window. And everything that we create, we do that through our frequency. And then our frequency brings it to us. So we don't need all that physical labor, that physical action that we had to have in 3D. So things become easier. We don't have to do all the hustling, grinding, because our energy does the work for us. So all of our work in 5D is in keeping our frequency as high as possible, which is what we talk about in all of these videos. So just wanted to throw that one in there because I think that is another big difference between the two operating systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we're starting to see a lot of the dialogue in, you know, different leaders and spiritual teachers out there who, you know, I feel like embody alignment to all that is source, you know, that unity consciousness. They really do talk about your beliefs and your thoughts, and you can shift them and you can change them, and you're not stuck in these old ways. It's not just, you know, again, your worth is not just what you do. Your worth is what you believe it to be. And you get to magnetize to you and call to you different experiences based off of your frequency. So, you know, there's a lot more happening simultaneously. You know, I know we talked about more of the linear timeline for 3D, 5D. You know, you can shift it all at once. If you have, you can go back to your childhood memories and you can shift your beliefs of what you thought of when you were 5 years old and how you created the world. And that shifts and impacts your present moment now. So we're starting to move into that already. There's been some practices on that, but it's, for me, it's the whole collective coming on board, not just few. Anything else, ladies? No. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this week, talking about the different consciousness between the third and fifth dimensions. We hope this was helpful. Feel free to add anything that you resonate with or you've learned or discovered as far as stepping into the fifth dimension consciousness. We always love your comments and shares. And if you like more of these videos, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to our different channels. You'll see all the links below. We'll see you next week for a new topic. Thanks so much. Bye.